Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Cohen, 2020 GeneSystems. We are based just outside of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We have a clinical lab, diagnostic lab, with a focus on early detection and prevention of cancer and other chronic diseases. Our main product today is a multi-cancer early detection blood test. We are one of two companies in the United States actively marketing what's called an MCED by acronym. The other is a well-known company called Grail. Many of you may have heard about that. It's a high-profile company. And unlike Grail, which looks at circulating tumor DNA, our test looks at tumor proteins or antigens. And there's several key advantages. Perhaps the most important is based on published data, ours and that of companies like Grail that have ctDNA-based multi-cancer tests. Proteins tend to be detectable in the blood at earlier stages. So we recently successfully completed a blinded validation study by the U.S. National Cancer Institute where they sent just under 1,000 specimens to us and about 24 other companies, and we had the third best performing test. And we believe one of the best in terms of early stage detection, particularly strong for pancreatic, ovarian, lung, and liver cancer. Those are some of our strongest performing cancers and for which there's tremendous unmet need for early detection. Another big advantage is that our approach requires much smaller quantities of blood, about 8 or 9 drops. The device that is shown on the right is one of several that we have validated and are now utilizing and shipping to our consumers, 2/3 of whom are opting for at-home capillary collection. The remainder, traditional venipuncture blood draws, where you have to go to a clinic and make an appointment and have a painful needle. So over 95% of those opting for capillary collection at home are successful getting enough blood. Now, keep in mind, this is not an at-home test or a point-of-care test. The blood specimens are shipped to our lab in Maryland, where we analyze it and report in about 3 days, typically. So the test is done in our lab. Very, very large markets, and in the United States is our main focus, although we do have a small overseas market where we license our algorithms, which is the proprietary aspect of our test. One of the reasons we're doing so well in the United States, we've had about close to a dozen consecutive quarters of revenue growth, and part of the reason is our cost. The cost of testing tumor antigens is substantially less than DNA sequencing, and we are able to pass that along to the consumer. So we started under $200, competitors close to 1,000. At scale, we'll be well under $100. We believe that by the end of this decade, most adult Americans, middle-aged and above, will be getting a multi-cancer test yearly, covered by Medicare and most major payers at that time. And we believe it will be our test or a test similar to ours, looking at tumor proteins. Those that have abnormal results may get a DNA test for additional insights as to location of tumor. But for primary testing, first-line testing, our test, which is more affordable, accessible, and accurate for early stage, will be the frontline test. So we see massive, massive growth potential. What have we accomplished to date? A little under 20,000 tests sold, high reorder rate, about a third of customers, particularly on the B2B side, are reordering annually, low cost of customer acquisition, line of sight to profitability. This graphically shows so far revenues will do just over 2 million this year, almost double from last year, 5 expected next year, and it continues to scale at that, basically at that trajectory or that rate of growth. We have a new product coming out in time for New Year's resolutions that it's called one test for longevity, Our cancer test is called One Test for Cancer, onetestforcancer.com. This test will look at a panel of inflammatory biomarkers and partnering with a leading academic medical center that has data from 200,000 people correlating precisely those biomarker levels with diet and exercise. So we can give people very concrete advice and recommendations as to what they can do to lower their biomarkers and risk of various chronic diseases. It fits into the new paradigm of Make America Healthy Again. In conclusion, we're an early mover in a massive market, strong patent position because we're an early entrant, substantial revenue growth, and we are IPO ready. We are looking at doing an IPO in the new year, working with a company called ClearingBid, which was also a very successful WeFunder portfolio company. I see that I've exceeded my 5 minutes and will leave the balance of my time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wow, amazing work. I think, obviously not just from a traction perspective, but also from an impact on society perspective. So thank you. One thing that I didn't hear from you is a little bit about yourself. Like, what were you doing before? How did you end up doing this? Any thoughts on team?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm actually by background a biotech patent attorney. I have a Master of Science degree in biotechnology from Johns Hopkins. I was in-house counsel for two publicly traded diagnostics companies before starting 2020. So, that's just a little bit about my background. We have a full team, 20 full-time employees. Our management team includes several executives that have had successful exits, either through mergers. The last company I worked for was acquired. I was the first patent attorney at the company that was acquired for $3.5 billion by Roche Diagnostics. Our CFO has taken companies public before, so I think we have a very seasoned team. Many of us have been working together for several years.
Very cool. How did your team end up doing this? Was there some sort of IP that was developed by anybody in particular prior to the company? Are you licensing it from somewhere?
Right. So the origins, we had an original product that we sold to emergency responders and particularly fire departments for screening suspicious powders, which was a big problem in the wake of the anthrax incidents. I had a small but profitable business, and we started observing about a decade ago that unfortunately a lot of firefighters were dying of cancers at a young age. And in fact, studies by the federal NIOSH, National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, have demonstrated that firefighters have proven higher incidence and death for a variety of cancers, close to a dozen of them, and they know it. So we segued and we started with a lung cancer test and moved into a multi-cancer test based on a model very common in East Asia. So in Taiwan, Japan, Korea, mainland China, people go once a year to something called a health check center, and they will get a set of biomarkers. We partnered with top-tiered research institutions from East Asia, and with them built machine learning algorithms. So we use traditional biomarkers, but innovative algorithms, and that's been our approach, and have been able to get patents for that. So we have a nice patent estate. But a big chunk, probably 65% of our market are actually our fire departments. We have about 200, but with new ones each week. They're getting reimbursed from their states, but we have a growing direct-to-consumer market and occupational health in general. So lots of market share out there to get, and it's not yet a crowded market.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. And so this company, it sounds like it was started quite a while ago, but there was a pivot along the way. When did this pivot happen?
So we had our COVID moment. Like so many labs, we pivoted to COVID PCR testing. We had huge revenue growth. We became 131st on the Inc. 5000 list, number one in Maryland, several years of profits. So we redeployed those profits plus about 12 million from equity crowdfunding. We were one of the first life science companies in America to succeed with equity crowdfunding. There are many more today. That was not the case when we started doing it. And use those proceeds, both profits and funding from the crowd, to build and validate one test for cancer. so that it's scientifically rigorous. And we were very pleased with the test performance earlier this year from the National Cancer Institute study, blinded validation study. So we're ready to scale. And that's why we are strongly, I'm in New York City as we speak, meeting with bankers, exchanges, investors. We would like to do an IPO. And the way we would do it would be a very crowd-friendly IPO where using the clearing bid process, where the retail investors can invest on the same terms and at the same time as the bankers. So check out our update page. You will see links to webinars that we did with Clearing Bid some weeks ago, very well attended, and have one coming up next week, by the way, specifically on this longevity test, which will be very interesting. So if you go to 2020's WeFunder page and go to the updates, you'll see links to those webinars.
Mm-hmm. How do you think about scaling up your customer acquisition? Talk a little bit about like the partnership arrangement or model that you have.
Yeah. So we think we have a very we have very good metrics in terms of cost of customer acquisition. So we really just need to do more of what we're currently doing. So on the B2C side, it's the usual suspects, Facebook, Google, et cetera. Pretty good return on ad spend. B2B is better. We have better metrics on that. And we need to hire more sales reps, go to more trade shows. Over time, I think that there will be Medicare reimbursement for these types of tests. There is a bill that may very well pass in this Congress, actually in the lame duck session, that would authorize CMS to cover these. It doesn't require them to cover them, but it authorizes them. So we're looking forward to that. So we're going to be we're going to be a growing company for at least the next 12 to 20 consecutive quarters. Very, very high growth rates.
Yeah. I guess I mean like honing in just on the B2B customer acquisition, like what you talked about partnering with fire departments, like what does that kind of look like just qualitatively? Like who do you talk with? How does payment happen? Is it the department paying you? Is it somebody else paying you? What does that look like?
So the departments pay us, but the exciting news and the good news is now about half a dozen states, our own state of Maryland, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and several others have programs specifically for fire departments and multi-cancer detection. So that's going to continue. That's going to be a domino effect. We believe that by 2027, at least 35 states will have these programs. Plus, there's money from FEMA for this purpose. So the fire department market is at least for the next 3 years. We think we can get to 100 million in revenue just with our existing markets, without any new products and without any new markets, based on but over 2 years of traction. So we have, and then there will be the general market, the general average American market is a whole nother area, and that will require more capital. And that's one of the reasons why we want to go public so that we can access larger amounts of capital over time and give liquidity for those shareholders that want it earlier.
Yeah. I guess I mean like honing in on just even specifically this fire department's like, how do you unlock that money from these programs? Like, is it salespeople calling up the department heads or like what is like what is the sales cycle like? Who makes the decision? What is stuff like that?
Right. It's about 9 months. It's a 9 month cycle because you're dealing with county, municipal and county budgets, but we're very good at it. There's a lot of word of mouth. It's a great community, a great customer base. There are certain trade shows that we know of are very, very effective, national trade shows. There's designated health and safety officers, usually at about the assistant chief level. So it's really, we're very, very good at this market and become very well known in it. And we help shape some of these state grant programs. I wrote the Maryland legislation that led to it, and it went from 100,000 to 400,000, and we have a bill going into our session next month that'll bring it to 3 million. New Hampshire, New Jersey has something, I think, in the neighborhood of 5 million. So this is snowballing, and these states tend to follow one another. There's sort of a Me Too phenomenon. So, we have a lot of tailwinds. And the longevity product will benefit from the new focus on food as medicine and attacking chronic disease that the new administration, RFK Jr. and the heads of CDC and CMS and NIH are talking about. So we have a lot of momentum right now. It's a very exciting time for us.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. I think we are at time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. What you
My
guys have
pleasure.
created is incredible, and I look forward to being a customer.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Elizabeth, again. Jonathan, actually, one more question from one of our investors. Questions from Mark. When do you expect your longevity test to be available and at what costs?
Thank you. We are working around the clock to have it available, believe it or not, by January 2nd. It's going to be a minimum viable product with a very basic algorithm, but it'll have two inflammatory biomarkers, CRP and IL-6, if all goes well. It will likely, as a single test, it'll likely be in around $70, but we are pushing for a subscription model. That's our goal, kind of a dream of consumer-facing companies is having a subscription where for a monthly fee of around $49, give or take, you can get 4 quarterly longevity tests and 2 semi-annual cancer tests. We will ship out a device like I showed you, the one I'm holding in my hand, the capillary collection device. That's going to be a ways off. Please join us next Wednesday at 1 p.m. East Coast time for a webinar on the longevity test. You can get the information on our update page. To the Zoom link, registration link is on the 2020 update page, which is, of course, on our WeFunder page. Thank you for that question.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And then also, if you guys do have any more questions, feel free to submit those on 2020 GeneSystems campaign page. I'm sure Jonathan could answer those.